Fandom. The ultimate display of human passion and creativity. No, seriously, fandom can be such an amazing and sometimes terrible place. One of the strongest representations of people's love for media. Media shapes all of our lives, whether that's books, movies, video games, anime. Most people probably have at least one thing that they're a fan of. As an autistic person, I have had extremely deep connections to shows or series that I have completely obsessed over. They have literally shaped how I am as a person, how I think and express myself. And fandom, the act of creating art or discussing said media, can really get people to come out of their shell by creating things they're super passionate about and connecting with other people over it. For most of my life, I have connected with fandom mostly through drawing, all the way back to when I was like 9 years old learning to draw an anime on a laptop trackpad, to over 14 years later where I still continue to draw my favorite characters. I never really was an extreme fanfiction person. I don't really read fanfic like other people do all that often, but I did occasionally dabble in writing some of it. Cue the horrific flashbacks to my 2017 Wattpad account, where 14-year-old me posted the cringiest inanimate insanity in an Ace Attorney fanfic using stolen artworks for the covers that scarily has apparently ranked within the top 100 fanfics using those specific tags? I mean, seriously, what the hell is this shit? It's number 63 in Ace Attorney, 10 in Clapalo? Why did these people click on a fanfiction with a typo in the first sentence of the fucking summary?
Wait, this story has number 5 in Miles Edgeworth. Not to go on a tangent 2 minutes into the video, but I do want to read some parts of the story real quick, just because I was 14 when I wrote it, so it's really funny in hindsight. Apollo sneezed. It was a pretty small and cute sneeze, too. Wattpad has this feature where you can comment on a specific paragraph, so that way your comment can be, like, specifically tied to a certain part of the story. And I fucking love how you can tell everyone on Wattpad was simping over Apollo Justice, because the paragraph is like, oh, Apollo was sitting at his desk doing boring-ass paperwork, describing his case and the fact that, like, he doesn't think his client is guilty, which is, like, the most boring fucking lawyer shit you can imagine. But then you click on the comments, and the comments are, he a good boy. he a good boy. And you gotta love words that are misspelled in one chapter but spelled correctly in the next. And also the fact that I couldn't write romance, so the only thing the characters do is just blush every other sentence. But the absolute funniest fucking reason I had to show this shit to you guys is that the first 3 chapters are a relatively normal, like, Ace Attorney, boring-ass fanfiction where it's like, oh, Apollo does paperwork, goes to a court case, Trucy is worried about him. And then the unpublished draft for chapter 4 just hard cuts to Clavier, like, making out with his guitar. Clavier kissed the strong, wooden neck of the guitar ever so slightly as he was polishing its beautiful, clear wood. He was gentle with it as he polished the neck, moving from the top to the bottom, ever so slowly. Apollo was listening to the guitar, was eavesdropping on the guitar sex.
Wow, fanfiction sure is a magical place, huh?
As soon as I became an older teen and had the epiphany that, ugh, Wattpad is cringe, I moved to Archive of Our Own, which is where I still post fanfic to this day. Not that I write excessively, but writing is a fun hobby that I like to indulge in. My work isn't anything special. I think we always tend to be our own harshest critics. Especially when looking back at shit you made as a teenager, you probably think it's a little cringe. But I do humbly think that I have improved since then. I think my biggest issue is that I am overly verbose and I use kind of complicated language to describe simple things, making my fanfic really long with huge-ass paragraphs, but you know what? Fanfiction at the end of the day is a hobby made purely for the fun of it. It doesn't have to be good, well-written, or overly amazing. It just has to be enjoyable for you to make and read. And I've certainly had some fun with the stories I've made. I tend to make a lot of cringy crossover stories because I love smashing together whatever my biggest interests at the time are. One of my oldest and embarrassingly most popular fanfics on AO3 was an Ace Attorney and Professor Layton crossover, where the calm, polite, and kind-natured Herschel Layton fucking punches Kristoff Gavin in the face and then falls in love with Phoenix Wright. My actual most popular fanfiction is one that I pumped out in 2024, being a crossover between Dungeon Meshi and FNAF, where Laios Toten's party ends up going to a medieval-styled Freddy Fazbear's restaurant. That one is not only my longest fanfic with the most views and likes, but it was also the first time I had ever completed a large multi-chaptered fanfic like that. I was really super encouraged by all of the positive comments that it got, since I rarely if ever get comments, so I pumped out the entire thing in like a month's time. Seriously, if you enjoy a story on AO3, please leave comments because it is something that can really make a fanfic author's day and encourages them to write. Even if you don't have a way with words, you can just comment something simple like a heart emoji or a "I love this" and it gets the message across. It is so much more meaningful than just kudos or likes. I had never written like that before and I was super proud of it. That got me to dip my toes into writing a lot more casually in my free time. Most of my other stories are way shorter. My other current favorite works is a collection of Chaotix-themed short stories, which are one-shots and comparatively shorter than fics with multiple chapters, but altogether, I've written at least a novel's worth of Chaotix fanfiction. Whoops! Because the act of writing fanfiction has been making me so happy lately, I have actually started making a lot of my fanfiction real.
But Sparkle, what on earth does that mean? Are you, enacting out the fanfiction in real life?
No, that's not what I mean. I know that sentence probably seems very confusing, so what do I mean by making my fanfiction real? I mean that I've been taking my fanfiction further than just a page on AO3, and I've been making further supplementary material to go along with it. Art, sure, but also things like an entire audiobooks and even physical media like books that I have printed and binded myself. I didn't even set out to do any of this, it just sort of happened, and when I realized how big these little fanfiction projects were getting, I said, oh, shit. You know, this would probably make an interesting video topic. So that's where we are today. Welcome to my video documenting my progress with turning my fanfiction real. If you yourself are a fanfiction author, I encourage you to try out some of these projects yourself if you have a story you're really passionate about, because it could be a really fun way to try something new. But then again, this video probably shouldn't be used as a tutorial because I am an amateur. I'm just living by my own feeling.
And I won't give in, won't compromise, 'cause I only have a steadfast heart of gold.
This is the most creative step, and if you clicked on this video to try to make your fanfiction real, then you've probably already done this part. Everyone has different processes when they write, and there really is no wrong way to go about it. Some people need to plan out every detail of a plot before they just open up Word and start writing a million words per second, but others might find it helpful to work out a basic plot outline before they get started. My fanfictions usually start with an idea. Sometimes I get a lot of specific ideas at once, like when I said I want to make a cringy-ass Sonic Hunger Games crossover. And not only did I have a lot of ideas for specific roles the characters could fill, like intricately planning which character fits each district in the world due to the regional exports and cultures and how that clashes with the characters' personalities and stories, but these media franchises have very interesting themes, so I had ideas for different messages/lessons that I wanted to convey in different story beats. Point is, I had a lot of interesting elements that I already knew before I even started I wanted to play with. Other stories might start out a bit more vague or with only one main idea in mind. I'd like to write a fanfiction about Espiel the Chameleon and his relationship with food. When I thought that, I didn't have a whole lot of real plot in mind, mostly just intending it to be a free-form flow of somewhat disconnected thoughts, but that's okay. Once I start brainstorming ideas for vague plot that could accompany those main ideas I want to explore, ideas might just creep upon me. I've started writing fanfiction before with no idea of what the main plot is, just a vague idea for an interesting concept I wanted to explore, but as soon as you start actually putting the words onto paper, You just start to get ideas for how the pieces of the puzzle of the plot should fit together. It can kind of just click as you're writing, so you don't always need to plan out every little intricate detail beforehand. Once I have my idea, I find it really helpful to make bulletin lists of all the major plot beats that I want to hit. This is just brainstorming ideas, and it can be super messy. No one is really going to see this but you, so I don't even have any regard for spelling or if it makes sense. I just go and get all of my ideas out onto the page. And I find rearranging the main major plot points into bulletin points specifically helpful because it lets me reorder the plot beats easily so I can plan out exactly what order I want all of the events in the story to happen in. For longer multi-chaptered stories, I usually have a full document just dedicated to putting down all of my ideas, and then separate from that, I have a little bulletin list of what I want to happen in each chapter. Then, write to your heart's content, using whatever notes you made as a guide to keep you on track. Everyone has their own unique style of writing, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. I personally try to make sure my stories have nice-looking grammar. You know, everything has capital letters at the beginning of the sentences, there are periods and punctuation, etc. But let's be real, this is fanfiction. It's not a professional school essay or a published book. You do not have to do that if you are that type of author and you don't feel like it. It just means I probably won't read your fanfiction because I personally cannot stand to look at it when it's written that way. And that's fine. But also, I know that even if I have my nice grammar, my shit isn't a masterpiece. Again, I use an ungodly amount of compound sentences and can be weirdly verbose, so yeah. There's a lot of advice and rules online about how to make your writing better. You know, shit like rising action, climax, falling action, or, always avoid alliteration? Using adverbs to describe something is always worse? But here's something kind of controversial that I think is more important to know than each of these rules. That it is 100% okay and even good to break those rules. But Sparkle, those kind of rules are helping to make writing better. Okay, they can be helpful to improve or strengthen your stories. Sometimes a piece of writing advice can really help add something to the scene, make it stronger. But this is writing. It's art. Art is flexible, and it shouldn't rigidly be conforming to some made-up standard just because that's the right way of writing. You can and should break rules if it'll fit your tone better. As long as you understand why a rule is there, you can also understand when your writing just won't fit into that rule. For example, that stupid always avoid alliteration rule. I get why people might say that. If you use a lot of alliteration in a paragraph, it will be obvious and it could sound repetitive and distracting. But alliteration and repetition is a tool, and it can absolutely be used in an artistic way if you use it with intent. There's a lot of poetry writing that uses alliteration beautifully. Shit, you got literary classics like The Raven from Edgar Allan Poe using alliteration in some of the stories over 200 years ago, and that's a story that's still discussed in literary settings to this very day. It can help put emphasis onto certain words or certain ideas to reiterate them in your reader's mind. So if you want a certain part of your story to have extra impact and stick in your reader's head, then maybe alliteration is the perfect tool for that. I'm not a good writer, but I have tried using repetition in stories to create emphasis. And regardless if me, some random fucking fanfiction author online who isn't that good at writing, used it well or not, at least I used it in an intentional way. I thought that it sounded cool and emphasized some of the emotions in the scene. I have also heard people fucking gasp at me when I said that show don't tell. The absolute golden rule of storytelling is mid-tier advice. Showing instead of telling is great. A passage from a book I love, Into the Pit, reads, "His voice sounded tight as the grip on the wheel, and Oswald could tell that his jaw was clenched." That's so much more interesting than just saying Oswald's dad was mad, and it paints a visual picture in your mind of the dad's body language. But sometimes there is information you just need to tell your viewer. Stuff that, if you instead opted to dance around saying it directly and instead painted it with flowery prose that doesn't really add anything to the story, but you're using it just because this rule tells you to show, don't tell, then it just won't be as effective. Especially in something like a quick action scene. Maybe showing instead of telling will slow things down a lot when being more direct will keep the pace going faster. But it's up to you to understand how showing instead of telling can elevate a scene, and when you feel like you could just tell someone something because it's more efficient and to the point and works better for the flow of a scene. I'm not saying to just throw away the original rule completely, because it is very useful and has some good, but you don't have to feel like you're restricted to those rules. Have fun writing the story that you want to write. And when all is said and done, it is rewarding to read through and make your final edits to your handcrafted story and then post it on the internet for all to see. Now, this is one of the most obvious things you can do if you want to have fun making more stuff to illustrate your story, in a very literal sense. Making art to accompany your story can give your story a visual element that can be nice to look at, and hey, making art is just fun.
But Sparkle, I don't know how to draw. I can only draw stick figures. I'm no good at drawing.
Shh. It's okay. You don't have to know how to draw in order to draw. I'm dead serious. It doesn't matter if your art is good or not, but what does matter is if you have a fun time making it. If you put true care and passion into your drawing, even if the actual quality of it is a little shoddy, then it's still a lovely, earnest charm in your craft. Besides, talent is an acquired skill. No one is born knowing how to draw, but with time and practice, your art will get better and better. I'm sure the very first fanfiction you made wasn't stunning quality. You practice writing by making more and more stories until you are at the point where you're happy with your writing. It's the same exact thing with drawn art. My art isn't the most incredible thing in the world, but I really do enjoy making art for my stories so that there's a nice visual to accompany them. And I've become more and more happy with my art and writing the more that I've worked on it. Oh, but please don't use generative AI to make your writing or art. Artificial intelligence will generate images or text based on predictive models, but it doesn't actually think for itself or understand anything. It is literally just putting pixels together in a way that has been based on the thousands of usually stolen works that it has been trained off of. ChatGPT is kind of like predictive texting on your phone, where your keyboard recommends the next word in a sentence based on what the most likely words in its database are. That's all it is. It can't actually reason or understand what it's churning out, which is why it often puts out misinformation. People go on about its ethical and moral concerns, like the fact that it steals, isn't creative, and is robbing people of their ability to use their creative muscles, and it's replacing artists in their jobs. But it's also just terrible for the environment. Data centers built to continue the use of AI pollute and use up water sources, reducing a resource that is essential for human life. Emissions from AI are truly on another fucking level, destroying the environment at a disastrous rate. Even if you think your art is shit, I promise using AI is not worth it. Anything you draw with a pencil or even a mouse in MS Paint has 1,000,000 times more value than slop churned out by a computer, and I promise someone out there will like it. And hey, if you really hate your own art that bad, I'm sure there are tons of artists out there that you could commission to make art for your story if you really want visuals for it. If you're looking for a Sonic artist, wink wink, nudge nudge. I already mentioned that Delicious and Fazbear's was the story that really got me into writing fanfiction more seriously. And if you take a peek on my channel, then you probably might have noticed or seen the 3.5 long fucking audiobook that I produced for it. It was basically my big project for the entire second half of 2024, and I spent literally countless hours on it. It's a giant audiobook project with original voice acting and art, with 18 big drawings done for it. I was actually inspired by an ancient My Little Pony fanfic audio drama called Bride of Discord. Now, I never really watched Bride of Discord at all when I was a child. I remember one night during a middle school sleepover, my beloved partner, who I love, excitedly pulled out her phone to show it to me, and it was fine, but not really my thing. The only thing I actually remember about it now was during an extremely long, 5-minute fucking musical number song about Applejack and Spike's romance, which I was definitely too young to understand the pedophilic implications of that dynamic, but I remember thinking to myself, geez, that ship is weird. How long is this gonna go on for? Because I'm kind of tired of it. No hate to that author or any of the voice actors, though. I'm sure they've grown a lot in the 10 years since that fanfiction was written. Anyways, I had seen the YouTuber Shunks make a retrospective video looking back on the series, which is how I knew about it. The plot of that series wasn't really relevant to my inspiration, but I was just inspired by what it was. An audio-based adaptation of a fanfiction with original art and voice acting. That genuinely seemed like such a cool idea to me, making a fanfiction accessible on a video or audio-based site like YouTube. So I decided to plan out my own audiobook. Now, Bride of Discord doesn't really have narration. It is an audio drama, not a fanfiction reading. It's more inspired by the fanfiction, but just adapted for an audio drama format. So it is just the voices of the characters speaking, with all of the action being implied by the audio and sound effects and art. But I didn't really want to do that for Delicious and Fazbear's, and I just stuck to good old-fashioned audiobook fanfiction reading. The very first thing I did with this project was immediately dive headfirst into the voice acting aspect. Now, in real life, I'm actually aspiring to be a voice actor, and at the time that I did this, I had studied and even taken classes on it. But I did not even have any of my vocal recording booth set up yet. I just sat at my desk and recorded it through my MacBook's built-in microphone using Audacity, which there's nothing wrong with that. It wasn't a professional project, so it doesn't have to sound like the most amazing audio quality in the world. The voice acting was both the easiest and the most taxing part of this project. It was very easy for me to get all of my lines done. Immediately, I knew that I wanted to do the narrator, and I also figured I could do Marcel since I have a higher pitched voice that can capture the feminine range pretty well. I wanted to find other voice actors to help me with the other characters though, because some characters are very out of my vocal range, and because if I voiced everyone, it might not be immediately obvious who was talking in a certain scene just because there are so many characters. So I sat my butt down and got straight to work. First, I read through the entire fanfiction again, and I copy-pasted all of the lines of dialogue into a document, sorting the lines of dialogue by character so that every character's lines were organized and in one place. Over the course of like a week, I busted out all of the narration, which totaled to like 2.5 hours of it since it had been edited down. Then I did all of Marcel's lines, which took me around 30 minutes. Then I applied my basic Audacity knowledge of normalizing the audio, compressing it, and cleaning up the background noise using noise reduction knowledge that I picked up in a high school class involving audio production, and I felt like I was good to go. For Marcel and the narrator, at least. I still needed to get voices for all the other characters, and that, honestly, was the hardest part of the audiobook. I started the audiobook in May, and originally I had wanted it to only take a month or two to produce at most, but because it took me so long to secure all of the voice files, it didn't come out until December.
Oh my god! December!
There's no hate to any of my voice actors, you guys are all lovely people, and I adore you all, but I do remember being an impatient little crybaby bitch of a man, so I remember amping up my annoyingness to 100 while I pleaded with my friends, please, please help me record audio for my stupid fucking thing. The recording process essentially had me making notes for all of the lines in the documents, telling the actors the context. Then I hopped on a Discord call and walked them through how to use Audacity to record so that they could just send me their Audacity files and I could edit it from there. I got to play voice director for a little bit, though if I were to be a voice director in real life, I probably would have acted more differently than I did in calls, but this was a super casual personal project with mostly just my friends, so I wasn't going to force anyone to take it too seriously. I had the most trouble with Senshi and William Afton because, I don't know if you could tell, but I have the most high-pitched squeaky dog toy baby ass fucking voice, and both of those characters are men with rather gruff, deep-sounding voices, completely outside of my vocal range. I'm not going to go too in-depth here, but it was a really long process because I had several people want to help with the voices, but things just ended up falling through. It was December when all of the recording was officially done. My partner Danny did Chilchuck.
Guys, I was joking about going in there. Can't we literally go anywhere else?
My friends Max and Anya did Laios and Senshi.
What if there's a monster hiding inside that restaurant?
What on earth led you to that conclusion? Why the hell would you think there's a monster hiding at a place like that?
It almost looks like you're trying to eat those. But you can't just eat flour and vegetables laying on a shelf. You gotta cook it up into a meal first. What am I saying? You can't actually be hungry, can ya? No, of course not. You're just a machine, aren't you?
And because I had just struggled so much with finding voice actors for the other characters, I just took on the task of doing William Afton myself. Horrible idea? Maybe. Even if it sounds like utter dog shit, it was the best I could do and I was tired of waiting. But if it's a personal audiobook project, the voices kind of don't have to be perfect or even accurate at all. Later, when I went on to make audiobooks for some of my Chaotix fics, I did all of the voices myself, even though I cannot believably do a good SBO or Vector. I can only believably do Charmy. I just did my best with what I had because it doesn't need to be perfect. I just wanted it to exist. Really, all that matters is that it's obvious which character is speaking and that you stay consistent with it. Your audience can suspend their disbelief and imagine the character's voice if you are just changing your voice enough to make it obvious who is talking. If you are interested in making an audiobook fanfiction of your own, you could either do all of the voices yourself if you want it done faster and not have to worry about finding the perfect voices or directing other people, or you can enlist the help of your fellow fan to help with voices. This would make it more engaging because the listener gets to hear a variety of voices, potentially ones that fit the characters way better than if you had to do it all yourself, but you also have to manage working with and relying on other people, so it will take longer. I had drawn and edited everything over the several months of waiting on voice actors. Some of these drawings were rushed and not the best because I was doing a lot of art all at once for this, but some of the drawings I really like. Again, I draw more than I write, and it's not amazing, but it's fun and not that hard for me to do. I edited what audio I had, and then I also picked out fitting enough video game music to throw in on the background of the audiobook. And that, my friends, is how the Delicious and Fazbear's audiobook came to be. A complete passion project that hopefully everyone had a fun time with. I know it has a rather silly and absurd premise, but it was also fun taking it so seriously. Again, I'm autistic and I'm very, very serious about my interest. A lot of people thought that fanfiction was a joke or a crack fanfiction, when no, it was not at all. I am earnest in all of the art that I make. Now, I'm not telling my viewers to go and listen to a 3.5 long audiobook, but if you are interested in like Dungeon Meshi or FNAF, it's linked in the description for your viewing pleasure. And I do very much encourage you to try making audiobooks of your fanfictions if you like listening to stories in an audiobook format, enjoy the act of voice acting, or if you just want practice with reading out loud, which can actually better your reading and speaking skills. Since I had already made my fanfictions into audiobooks, I figured, why not bring that over into physical media? I am a huge fan of physical media. I always prefer to own the physical copy of a game or movie over just a digital copy, because I get to keep that media forever, and it can't be taken away by subscription services running out or something like that. Plus, it's just cool to have physical objects. Now, I'm sure you could adapt this over with CDs if you care about good quality audio, but for my stories, I wanted a more retro, old-school feeling. I have really gotten into cassette tapes, partially because I ended up finding a working first edition 1985 Teddy Ruxpin toy in the Goodwill bins for a freaking $1. Let's fucking go! For those who weren't around in the 80s, these bad boys were the world's first animatronic toy, costing $80 in 1985, so it was very much a rich kid toy. You pop in the cassette tapes and he would read you stories correlating with the physical storybooks sold alongside the tapes, and his eyes and mouth would move with the audio based on the animations programmed into the tapes. There's a left and a right side to the audio track, and on the right track there was this low droning sound which correlates with certain mouth movements.
Come dream with me tonight. Hi there.
I think a lot of people my age who loved indie horror games in the 2010s will recognize this concept from the horror game Tattletale, which the main Tattletale creatures are based on Furbies, but the Mama Tattletale is based on Teddy Ruxpin mechanically, as it tells stories with even the same exact droning tone in the background of the audio.
The children thought that Mama would never find them as long as she couldn't see them. Turn the page.
So yeah, cassettes were the way to go for me specifically, so I could play with my shiny new old toy. And who better to read a FNAF fanfiction out loud than an actual animatronic bear? Step 1. Acquire something that can record sounds onto cassettes and also blank cassettes. Based on the research I did while looking into this subject, if you want better quality audio, then you should invest in finding a well-acclaimed vintage brand of a cassette deck. They apparently don't really make them like they used to anymore, since cassettes have largely fallen out of style, so modern ones don't really have the best quality. But my ass is as broke as the Chaotix, and the nice ones on eBay were out of my price range. I decided I didn't really want good quality audio anyways, because Teddy Ruxpin's speaker is not the best. It's extremely crunchy and old, and since I wanted to put a horror story into him anyways, I figured leaning into that creepy old crunch was a good thing. I ended up getting a Jensen cassette recorder and a Maxell branded blank tapes off of Amazon for an affordable price. Now, again, you might want to invest in something better if you want really nice, crisp audio, but for my purposes, this worked and was super easy to use. Next was planning out how much audio to put on each tape. Depending on the tapes you have, a different amount of audio can be recorded on each side. I got 90-minute tapes, so each side has 45 minutes of audio. I divided my audiobook up into parts that both fit these time slots and also made sure that it was cutting out where there was a natural break in the story. Like, instead of just chopping it off mid-sentence, make sure it comes to the end of a scene before you have to flip over the tape for the next part. To be honest, I found it useful to open up an Excel sheet and do math with how long each chapter was so I could efficiently fit the audio onto the tapes. Then it's recording time. Connect your aux cord to your computer, wind the tape to the beginning, hit record, and then wait a few seconds to make sure it's actually recording, and let your audiobook play. If you have it cut into parts like me, make sure to keep an eye on it while it's recording so you can pause at the exact right spot and make sure that it ends where it should. Now, the actual audio of the cassettes is done! I decided to make a lot of fun labels for my cassettes using paper, markers, and glue. Simply measure how big the space on the front of the cassette is and graph it onto paper. Cut holes for the holes in the tape, and then draw your design on it. You can have text designating the story title and which side of the tape it is, but I also liked adding little drawings to the labels too. Glue those onto the front of the cassette. Finally, you can make a cover for your cassette's case if you have one. I just drew plain art on these, but I also think it would be really fun to put plot summaries on the back of this too if you wanted to. These are really neat little cassettes, and I was super happy to be able to make them. Bookbinding is one of those crafts that looks and sounds so super cool, but it kind of requires you to be a very precise and neat crafter, and I am not. I am the messiest ass artist in the world, with pretty much every single craft I do. Drawing, writing, you name it. I have the mindset of, it doesn't have to be perfect since I'm just doing this for fun, and I'm generally just a little cluttered as a person. To illustrate what I mean, the one time I tried cross-stitching, I horrified everyone by not giving a shit about being inconsistent with the direction of the stitches, LMAO. Bookbinding is the craft of creating a physical book. Isn't that the coolest sounding idea for a fanfiction project? Taking something you wrote and making it real and tangible that you can hold in your hands and read. I thought it was super neat. It starts with typesetting, or formatting the fic to be in a format that allows it to be easily printed out, which sounds really complicated, but it's actually both super easy and fun. There are several YouTube tutorials I watched about this, and I encourage you to look up typesetting videos if you want an actual tutorial, but essentially, you click this button to download the HTML of your fic, and copy-paste that into a document. I learned how to do this in Google Docs, but recently I've switched to Ellipsis for writing fanfiction because it's more writer-friendly, it's easier to use, and it doesn't scrape your data for AI. I think you could do this with most writing programs like Words or Docs, though. Once you've got your fic in your program, you set the paper and margin size. Then you go fucking crazy, have fun, and be yourself! Picking out fun fonts, decorating the pages with cute headers or page dividers and borders. You could use clip art or assets and edit them to look okay when printed black and white. The sky is the limit. Once everything's the way you like it, there's this bookbinding website that will literally format the pages into the correct order for you, so you have to do none of the hard stuff. Hooray for technology! I did this with Delicious and Fazbear's, as you've probably guessed at this point. I picked fonts that looked like they kind of fit the old-timey medieval fantasy vibe that Dungeon Meshi has, and formatted it very simply. I made the book have a table of contents, page numbers. I stole a horrible looking border from Google Images and slapped its ass onto the cover page. Yes, I know it looks weirdly stretched, let's move on. I also made a copyright type page with all the relevant information. My name and the dates that the story was published, credit to Ryoko Kui and Scott Cawthon for the original series. Shoutouts to the main artist whose work inspired my work, and also put a link to the audiobook I made with a note about how the audiobook has slight changes to the fanfiction. And that was due to me both allowing the voice actors to improv a little with the audiobook version and due to some other changes I made as noted in the director's commentary, which I will talk about later. This is cool because it means if you have the physical book, you could type that audiobook URL into your phone and listen to the book as you read, or at least that was the idea behind it. You could put pretty much anything you want on your book. Maybe you could even add quotes from the story, or a summary page, author's notes, or comments that review the book favorably. Just some fun ideas for y'all to steal. I also didn't add any of the art I made for the story into the book itself, because sometimes digital art doesn't look the best if it wasn't made specifically to be printed in a black and white book. All of my drawings had complicated backgrounds that were colored in, so when printed in black and white, it would look like a big gray box, and I'm not a fan of that. To me personally, the best illustrations for books aren't colored in, so that they look nice just as line art. Fun fact, something similar happened with the official Five Nights at Freddy's Fazbear Frights book series. Each story was originally going to have a drawing accompanying it, but it ended up being scrapped when the art didn't look as good printed in black and white as it did digitally. But if done right, I think art in books could look really nice. Then bam, presto, it is done! My book was short enough to barely meet the local library's page limit for how many free pages I could print each week. You could also go to a FedEx or something to have your story printed, but I encourage you to check out your local library because oftentimes, if you have a library card, they might just let you print out something for free. Now I have a bunch of paper with the pages of my book on it, yay! But all of the pages were out of order and kinda hard to read. This is because they hadn't been sorted into signatures yet. Basically, when you make a book, you sew a bunch of pages together. A signature is a small set of pages that are grouped together. The number of pages and signatures will vary based on the book. For example, with this one, I believe I had around 7 or 8 signatures made up of about 7 or 8 pages each. Group the pages into their proper signatures and then fold the paper in half as nice as you can, and voila, the pages are in order now. After this, I sewed the pages together after watching several YouTube tutorials. This was pretty simple as sewing is very intuitive to me, and I stitched the pages together so they were very nice and secure. The cover is the most difficult part. You need some kind of sturdy material like cardboard or cardstock to act as the base. I ended up ripping the cardboard backs off of some old sketchbooks and cutting the book covers and spine out of that. And again, I'm not good at bookbinding. I try to be nice and neat and as precise as I could be with the measuring and cutting, but it still came out imperfect. It didn't help that I don't have those fancy measuring cutting tools that all those YouTube bookbinders do. If you want to spend the extra money to invest in that stuff, absolutely go for it, but I'm both broke as the Chaotix and not that much of a perfectionist. It was really difficult thinking of how I wanted to do the cover. Some kind of paper or printed design. For Delicious and Fazbears, I stole some leather out of my mom's craft room like a devious little thief, and then I bound the cover using that, gluing the leather on slowly and stretching it so it was nice and smooth over the cardboard. I also made the inside cover by covering the cardboard with colorful cardstock. Now I'm gonna tell you guys my biggest mistake, and you have to promise not to laugh at me. I glued the book into the cover at this point, and it looked pretty great, to me at least. There was an extra blank page at the beginning and end of the book, making it easy to glue each end to the inside of the cover. It opened and closed perfectly. How wonderful! But then I got the idea of, oh, this story is set in medieval times, so maybe I should age the paper to give it that cool, withered look. For those who don't know, you can easily make paper look old by rubbing it gently with a wet coffee filter still holding some coffee grounds. So I did that. And the moisture from the coffee ripped the first page out of the cover. It was a total disaster. I ended up having to frantically find some way to reattach the book to the cover when the next page was the title page, so I couldn't just glue that down. I got an extra sheet of paper and glued it to the spine of the binding and then attached that to the front cover, and now it looks like complete dog shit, but at least it's attached. Pro tip: If you want to age the pages of your book, do it before you glue it into the cover. My mistake. At least the pages look kinda cool now that they're stained yellow and crispy and worn looking. I also flipped to a scene near the end of the story. The main bad guy, William Afton, gets spring-locked, meaning he is impaled violently and painfully. So I mixed some red and brown acrylic paint, watered it down, and then flicked it over the paper like a blood stain. It dried a lot more purple than I wanted it to be. Dried blood isn't bright red, it's more of a muddy brown-red color. So definitely test the color before you do this, but I thought it would be cool to add little artistic touches like a fake blood splatter. The final step was painting the cover, and I was very inspired by the official Five Nights at Freddy's survival logbook, which is meant to look like a leather book but with these golden accents, pretty border, fun little pizza designs in the corner. It's so cool. I tried to mimic the logbook's border and pizza designs on Delicious and Fazbear's, delicately painting with acrylic in the smallest brush that I had. Then I printed the name of the book in nice letters before drawing a cute little Freddy design. And that is how I made Delicious and Fazbear's into a real physical book. I made some mistakes with it, but I'm very happy with how it turned out for my first time bookbinding. And now, an interlude. Me, the most normal fanfiction writer, listening to my own audiobooks on a Teddy Ruxpin with the physical book to read alongside it.
Marcel froze. Her breath caught in her chest, her eyes unable to look away from the grand stage. The curtains were still drawn open from when she had thrown them aside to examine the automata, so she was able to get a clear view of them, even from here at the back of the room. Front and center stood Frederick, and to his left stood that yellow chicken. Both were still and unmoving, still in their proper positions where they should be. On the left side of the stage, where Luke playing rabbit should be, the space was completely empty. The automaton was gone. Marcel blinked and then rubbed her eyes, but it didn't seem to.
This final section is less big, massive projects like the other things, but more so little ideas I came up with if you want to further engage with your own stories. For some of my stories, I did something called a director's commentary. I don't actually put a lot of author's notes into my stories because it interrupts the flow, and I kind of don't want to just spill all of my secrets in the story notes itself. But that doesn't mean I don't want to talk about my stories, like going, in this paragraph, this line is a reference to this or that, or explaining how I came up with certain ideas or something like that. Thus, director's commentary, my own comments just compiled in a big-ass post that's linked off-site. I think this would be fun to put into a video format too, so that it feels like a movie director's commentary, and you could read parts of the fanfiction you're referring to. Share your fanfiction thoughts on its own website or blog. I have seen people use little custom wikis for world building their D&D campaigns or something like that, and if you are the type of person to really like world building, then I suggest giving it a try. You would be surprised at how simple something like a wiki builder or even a NeoCities page can be to use. In fact, NeoCities uses HTML, the same thing AO3 uses, so you could potentially use the same code to post your fanfiction on its own site. And finally, dress up in cosplay and LARP your fanfiction like it's some edgy fucking movie. Okay, I'm joking about that last one. That's probably way more trouble than it's worth and might get you called cringe by losers online. But like, if you already have a cosplay of a character in a story of yours, maybe it'd be fun to read part of it in that character and like post it on like TikTok or something. I don't know what goes down on TikTok. Don't ask me. I'm too old for that. Or if you're artistically inclined, you could make animatics or animations of it. And those, my friends, are all of my thoughts on making your fanfiction more real by adding those fun little supplementary materials to support your fanfiction and further have fun creating stuff for it. If you have your own thoughts or ideas on other ways you could bring your fanfiction to life, feel free to comment them below. And if you actually end up trying any of these ideas, share it down below too. I'm sure we would all love to see your creative work. Honestly, the thesis of this video is illustrated by this Tumblr post by the user Androgynosaurus. Honestly, be pretentious as fuck about the stuff you create. Do a press release for your fanfiction updates. Do a Q&A about your webcomic. Make fake merch designs for your OCs. Commission official book covers. Very few of us will ever get to a stage where something we've created makes it big. But even if you have an audience of 5 people plus a shoelace, fucking indulge in yourself and pretend. It's the only way to live. And I wholeheartedly agree with this user sentiment. I want to encourage your creativity with writing, art, creative projects. Expand your horizons and make something without the fear of being cringe. Indulge in your art and above all, have fun with it. Alright guys, that's gonna be all from me for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm sorry I've been very inconsistent with uploading videos. 2025 was not my year, and I've been going through a lot of really rough in real life circumstances. If this were an author's note, I would tell y'all the insanely crazy sounding story about why it took me a day longer to post a new video, but it's honestly not appropriate for YouTube since it deals with serious topics. But I am finally in a comfortable place in life, ready to dive back into video editing, and I hope it shows. I also really hope you guys enjoy the new background and poses for Sparkell. I love you guys with all my heart. Bye!